Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and prepare the capacitor for this. This is the one that comes with the Hobby Wing stack. What I do is I have a heat shrink and then a couple spare wires that I just have laying around from the mini drone builds I have. These are just the, I think like 22, 24 gauge wire, black and red. You don't have to use black and red. It just keeps things color coordinated for you for ground and power. If you only have one color, make it work. Just, make sure you know which wire is which when you're hooking everything up. The way you can tell in the cap is it has a negative symbol on the negative side. So, and if it doesn't have the actual negative symbol, it'll usually have that big white line on caps, and that's always going to be the negative side. And so first thing I do is I go ahead, you don't need this much wire because the way we do it, I remotely mount it so it's wired. It's not wired directly to the board. There's not enough room in here, and it's just not going to work right there. So I use the wires, and because of that you don't need the long metal leads, so I trim them down pretty short to about there. So as you can see, that's just barely anything. And then what I'm going to do then is I actually do my best to tin these little leads. You're not going to be able to see this. My camera doesn't have a zoom function. I'm using the GoPro right now, mainly because the autofocus doesn't have issues like my other camera does. And so just get a little solder on them. Alright. Once those have a little solder on them, they're ready to be wired up. Next step would be to get the wires ready. So gotta get them tinned also. Just like any other wire and board, you tin your work surfaces first. That way you can just touch the solder to them and they'll be good to go. I don't have a way to hold this, so I'm gonna try to set it up like that. Alright, once they're tinned, you should be able to just touch it real quick and it'll set. Alright, there you go. Now something about, and I'll show you on the flight controller when I get to that point, but when I have wires that have been soldered somewhere, I try to isolate the soldered area from movement. So because that's the most brittle area. When you solder the wires, the area connected, like the soldered wire connected to the rest of the flexible wire, that becomes brittle with movement over time. The way I do that, you can do that with hot glue. Hot glue is an easy way to do it on components that don't get hot. If it's not going to get hot, you can do hot glue over it. It'll keep, what you want to do is you want to hot glue it to the point where it's only allowing the flexible wire to move around, because the flexible wire will be a lot harder to break from wear versus the brittle soldered area. But what I use mainly is Bondic. It's a UAV glue. The way it works is you do layers, and this one might be out. There we go. So what I do is I build up a little layer around it on both sides, and the goal is to get it up high enough that it's going to isolate the wires, the soldered area from the flexible area. That way movement won't affect the soldered area, because that's where it'll break. So once you get a little bit on there, and the way UAV glue works, if you took it out into the sun long enough, it would harden up. Otherwise, I use one of these little, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's a little UAV light, and you hold on there, and depending on the brand, the actual Bondic itself, the brand Bondic, hardens up very quickly, like 5 seconds. This is an off-brand one that I bought in mass quantity for savings, so you usually got to hold it on there a lot longer, like 10-15 seconds maybe. But it's worth it because it's expensive. The Bondic stuff is actually expensive. It's like $9 for one of these little tubes, versus I bought like 5 bottles of this size. I'll try to find the link. I bought 5 bottles of this size. Doesn't come with the flashlight. You get it separate, but it was like $30 for 5 or like 9 bottles of this size. So worth it in the end if you use it a lot. and I do. I don't mind holding it here a little bit longer for the price. You can kind of touch it, and if it has a real tacky feel, it's not fully dried. Alright, so to test it, where is it moving at? So I can add another layer. It's not quite ready. You just kind of build up. You can't do too much at once because it takes too long to dry at that point. So you do it in small layers and just keep building up upon that. But this way, you know, this is bulletproofing your quad. It's a little details like this that'll make your quad last longer in those wrecks that you have all the time. One of the things about capacitors is if you have a wire come loose off of a capacitor, you have one connected, the other one's not connected to your quad, your board will short. Or it'll short your board, causing a board reset. So like if you have Betaflight OSD, the whole thing shuts down. You get the start tones all over again. So if that ever happens, one of the first things you should check is if you're getting if your wires on here or the ones connected to the board are securely connected. That's one of the main reasons that happens, at least to me. Once I have that set right there, I go ahead and heat shrink it also. I don't think this is honestly necessary, but I do it partially for grip, for the zip tie to grip it easier and hold it down more securely against the frame. This creates more friction against the frame than the cap itself. Alright, now that the cap is ready to be installed. At this point, I flip my frame over and I go ahead and prepare it. Like on this one, it's going to be mounted on the bottom. You could mount it on the top if you want, right there. It would work just as well. And it goes through. You can just go through the motor wire hole for the wires, or mount it on bottom. I've tried both. There's no difference really. It's just whatever you prefer. I haven't had issues with them ever being damaged. Just pick a side. I think I gravitate. I always seem to just go to the right side of the quad. I don't know why. I just do. I use 2 zip ties just to take up the full width of it to eliminate as much movement as possible. I'm sure 1 zip tie would work though. Alright. That's not going anywhere. It's locked in. You take the wires, you can run them through. You have several options you can run them through. You can run them through that hole, you can run them through that hole. I'm not using this little zip tie hole, accessory hole, however you want to use it. I'm going to use it to route the wires through. I've also run it through here. I've run it through here before. No problem, man. Oh, actually, before routing the wires, I did make that mistake. You want to put this on, because that's going to go like right there, and you'd have a hard time because of this. It's covered. So this just comes off. These are done by Patrick Bishop of PB3D Creations. He's been good to us over the past couple years, and does these custom for us. Not just us. He does a lot for the FPV community, so give him a look. Give him some support. Support the small businesses when you can. Press down firmly on all spots. Isn't that clean looking? That's nice. See, when I use the Velcro straps, you can't see the logo anymore. So this way you can see the logo. That's nice. Alright. I'm twisting the wires up, and this is mainly just to make a stronger unit and to make it easier to control going through here. See why I use tweezers? These wires, man. They teeny tiny. Ooh. And see, I didn't measure this out. I just grabbed a couple of spare wires, and one of my wires is almost too short. But I can make it work. And never pull a wire tight and measure it that way. Always give yourself a little breathing room in case something happens and you got to move the component around. You don't want it to be real tight, so I'm gonna give it about that much room. If you have the capability to give it a breathing room, do it. It is almost always better to have too much wire than too little. Alright. Next part will be the battery leads. Now this comes up down to you on how long you want yours to be. I typically have it to where it'll run and meet the battery. If the battery's like right there, it's meeting the battery about halfway down this spot. So halfway down the battery, what do you call it? Strap. Halfway down the battery strap. And so I'll pull it like that, and then I pull it tight. And so from there, I pull it up. I do a quick measure. I'm not a real stickler on exact length on these. I just get it close to it because when let me pull another quad up and I'll show you. So this one actually needs a new camera cord. It got damaged. So when I put a battery in, I have Velcro like that. So this is the dual lock Velcro. It's worked really well. You hear that little pop when you're putting it in. And then the strap gets tightened. And then from there, you can run it around like this. And that way the leads are real tight. Or you can run it down like this and it'll be open. You can run it through here if you want to do it that way. You can run it through here and have a shorter lead in the back. It just depends on how you want to do it. I tend to go like this and I meet it right there. And so that's what I'm going to continue doing. Because one thing is, you don't want it to be so tight, like the connection to be so tight that if you crash and the battery slips forward that it unplugs or moves and it'll unplug. You don't want that to happen. You want to have just like your normal, like the wires, like I said, it's better to have too long of wires than too short of wires. Too short of wires leads to things breaking, pulling apart, coming apart, and so forth. And at that point, I have it set pretty much how I want it, and it's lined up positive and positive, or positive to positive, negative, negative, and I just go in. And I cut to the end when I'm measuring it. I cut to the end of the pad. I don't cut to the very beginning of the pad. I cut to the very edge of the pad over here. Alright, those are cut. Same thing with these, just because they're bigger doesn't change the thing. I still want to twist them together, create a stronger bond, a more secure connection, and then just find some way to set them up to where usually I have a third hand, but it's too bulky for the video.